The dead do not drift. That was the first lesson every salvage crew learned. Bodies stayed where they fell. Ships stayed where they died. The dead zone held everything in its cold grip like a museum of forgotten violence. Oh, when Commander Yessa saw the ship moving, she thought her eyes had failed her. Impossible, she whispered. Her forearms gripped the console as she leaned forward. The vessel was ancient. Its design matched nothing in any database. It tumbled slowly through the debris field, catching starlight on surfaces that should have been dust centuries ago. Commander, her pilot, a young Rilthari named Fossek, waited for orders. Bring us alongside. Carefully, the salvage ship moved through floating wreckage. Broken hulls from 100 different species surrounded them. This region of space had been a battlefield 400 years ago. 3 fleets had met here and destroyed each other completely. Nothing lived in the dead zone. Nothing worked. Nothing moved. Until now, they docked with the strange vessel using emergency clamps. The airlock took several attempts to open. When it finally hissed and gave way, stale air rushed out. Air that had been sealed inside for longer than anyone could guess. Yessa led her crew through dark corridors. Their lights cut through dust that hung motionless in zero gravity. The ship's interior was alien to them. Soft edges, warm colors beneath the grime, writing on the walls in a language that tickled something in Yessa's memory. Commander, Pallas, her medical officer, stood before a door that glowed faintly blue. There is power here. Somehow, they forced the door open. Inside was a single pod. Frost covered its surface. Through the ice, they could see a shape. A body. Yessa wiped the frost away with her sleeve and stared at what lay within 0.2 arms. 2 legs. Flat face with small features. Pale skin. Hair on its head. By the ancestors, Fossek breathed. Is that what I think it is? Pallas ran his scanner over the pod. His scales went pale. The readings say this creature has been in stasis for over 800 years. And Commander, he looked up with wide eyes. It is still alive. Yessa felt her heart's beating faster. She had heard stories as a child. Every species had. Tales of creatures from a deadly world. Beings who could survive anything. Who felt emotions so strongly that they went mad. Who loved and hated with equal fire. Humans, they were supposed to be extinct. Their world had been destroyed 400 years ago, caught between 2 fleets that cared nothing for the small blue planet in their way. The humans had died screaming, the stories said. All of them. Every last one died, but here was one. Sleeping. Waiting. We should leave it, Fossek said. Report to command. Let them decide. If we report this, the military will take it, Pallas argued. They will cut it apart to study it. A living human. The last of its kind. Yessa stared at the frozen face. It looked peaceful, almost childlike in its sleep. She thought of the war that had raged for 600 years. The trillions dead. The planets burned. The children on her own world who had never known a single day of peace. Wake it, she said. Commander, wake it now, before I change my mind. Pallas hesitated only a moment. Then he connected his equipment to the ancient pod and began the revival sequence. Lights flickered. The pod hummed. Frost melted and ran down the sides like tears. The humans' eyes opened. They were brown. Simple brown. Not the fierce red of warriors or the cold blue of killers. Just brown. Confused. Scared, the human sat up slowly. It looked at its hands. Then at the 3 aliens standing before it. Its mouth opened and closed several times before sounds came out. Where am I? The translator took a moment to process the ancient language. When Yessa heard the words, she felt something strange. The human's voice was soft, tired, not threatening at all. You are on a Rilthari salvage vessel, she said. You have been asleep for a very long time. The human rubbed its face. I got lost. The navigation failed. I had no choice but to freeze myself and hope someone would find me. It looked around at the dusty pod, the ancient ship. How long? Over 800 years. The human went very still. 800 years of processing. 800 years of everyone he knew being dead. Yessa expected screaming, crying, violence. Instead, the human just nodded slowly. I need to go home. Please, take me to Earth. The crew exchanged looks. Yessa felt her throat tighten. How do you tell someone that everything they loved is gone? That their entire species no longer exists? What is your name? She asked, buying time. David. David Reese. He tried to stand and nearly fell. Pallas caught him with two of his arms. David looked at the alien who held him and managed a weak smile. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm still waking up. Please, just take me home. My wife will be worried. Yessa closed her eyes. Her people had destroyed worlds. She had given orders that killed thousands. But nothing had ever felt as heavy as the words she had to speak now. David, she said gently, there is no Earth. Not anymore. Your people are gone. All of them. You are the last human in the universe. David stared at her. The brown eyes that had seemed so soft went empty. Hollow. Like someone had reached inside and removed everything that made him alive. That he did not scream. He did not cry. He simply sat back down in his frozen coffin and said nothing at all. 3 days passed before David spoke again, that he sat in the corner of the small room they had given him. He ate when food was brought. He drank when water was offered. But his eyes stayed fixed on the wall, seeing nothing, seeing everything. The crew did not know what to do with him. They had expected rage, grief, something they could understand. Instead, there was only silence. A silence so heavy that even Fosek, who never stopped talking, found himself whispering when he walked past David's door. On the fourth day, Yessa found David standing at the observation window. Stars stretched out before him. Somewhere in that vast darkness was a debris field where a blue planet used to spin. Show me, David said without turning around. Yessa stepped beside him. She pulled up the navigation display and pointed to a region marked in red. There, that is where your sun still burns. But the third planet. She hesitated. There is nothing left. Only rocks and radiation. David watched the display for a long time. His reflection in the glass looked like a ghost. How? He finally asked. 2 fleets met in battle near your system. Your people had no defenses, no allies. You were caught in the crossfire. Yessa paused. It was not intentional. Your world was simply in the way. In the way. David repeated the words like he was tasting something bitter. I am sorry. How long has the war been going on? 600 years. 3 factions. The Real 3 Empire, which is my people. The Morvani Collective. The Sindari Republic. We have been killing each other since before your kind left your planet. David turned to look at her. His eyes were no longer empty. Something was building behind them. Not rage. Something else. 600 years, he said. How many dead? Trillions. 47 species have gone extinct. Hundreds of worlds are uninhabitable. And you keep fighting? Yessa straightened her spine. We fight because we must. Because our enemies will not stop. Because surrender means death. What are you fighting for? The question caught her off guard. For survival. For our people. For no. David shook his head. What started it? Why did 3 empires decide that trillions of lives were worth spending? Yessa opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She searched her memory. The histories she had learned as a child. The propaganda she had repeated as an officer. The reasons had always seemed so clear. Trade routes, she said slowly. And religious differences. And old insults between our founders. And resources. And territory. And now nobody remembers which reason came first. Yessa said nothing. Over the following days, David began to move through the ship. He sat with the crew during meals. He asked about their families. He learned their names. Not just names, but details. Fosek's mother who made pottery. Pallas's brother who had died in battle 10 years ago. The navigator's dream of seeing the crystal nebula before she died. The crew found this strange. Uncomfortable. In their culture, such closeness was reserved for blood relatives only. Soldiers did not share meals with strangers. They did not speak of lost brothers or secret dreams. But David asked. And somehow, they answered. Why do you do this? Pallas asked one evening. Why do you care about us? David looked at the medical officer with those soft brown eyes. Because you're here. Because you're real. Because knowing someone is the first step to caring about them. We are your captors. We could hand you to the military. They would study you. Experiment on you. Would you? Pallas hesitated. 2 weeks ago, the answer would have been yes. Following orders was survival. Sentiment was weakness. But now, having shared meals with this strange creature, having heard David ask about his brother, having watched those brown eyes fill with genuine sadness at the story of his death. No, Pallas admitted. I would not. Then you're not my captor. You're my friend. The word hung in the air. Friend. Such a simple concept. Such a dangerous one. Friends were liabilities in wartime. Friends made you weak. Friends died and left you broken, But David said it so easily. Like it cost him nothing. Like it was the most natural thing in the universe. That night, Yessa found David alone in the observation room again. He was crying silently, tears running down his face as he stared at the stars. David, he wiped his eyes quickly. Sorry, I thought I was alone. You do not have to apologize for grief. I'm not grieving. He laughed softly, a sound with no joy in it. I mean, I am. But that's not why I'm crying. He turned to face her. I'm crying because I realized something. What? I'm angry at you. At all of you. Your stupid war killed everyone I ever loved. My wife. My daughter. My entire species. I should hate you. He took a shaky breath. But I don't. I can't. Because when I look at you and your crew, I don't see enemies. I see people. Lost, scared, lonely people who have forgotten what they're fighting for. Yessa felt something crack in her chest. A wall she had built over decades of service. I want to talk to whoever is in charge, David said. The leaders. The generals. Whoever decides to keep this war going. There are thousands of them. Hundreds of leaders on each side. David nodded slowly. Then I'll talk to all of them. Yessa stared at him. This small, soft creature from a dead world. This last remnant of a forgotten species. You cannot stop a war with conversation, she said. David smiled sadly. Maybe not. But I have to try. It's what humans do. News travels faster than light when it wants to. Within a week, every empire knew. A human had been found alive. The mythical deathworlders. The species from the poison planet who supposedly could not be killed. One had survived. The reactions were immediate. The Real 3 High Command demanded David be brought to them for study. The Morvani Collective offered a fortune for his living body. The Sindari Republic simply sent assassins. They wanted no weapon existing that they did not control. The first killer came disguised as a supply delivery. A Sindari agent with scales the color of midnight and eyes that held no warmth. She found David in the mess hall, eating soup with Fossek. She moved fast. Her blade was drawn and swinging before anyone could react. David did not fight back. He simply looked at her, met her eyes. The blade stopped an inch from his throat. You could have been my friend, he said softly. The assassin froze. Something in those simple words, that gentle voice, cut deeper than any weapon. She stared at David, at the fear in his eyes that he made no attempt to hide, at the sadness. I was paid to kill you, she said. I know. I'm sorry you were put in that position. He was sorry. For her. The woman sent to murder him. The blade lowered. Shaking hands returned it to its sheath. The assassin turned and walked away. She never reported back to her handlers. Instead, she disappeared into civilian space, eventually opening a small shop that sold flowers. The second attempt came 3 days later. A Morvani soldier with more hatred than skill. David talked to him for 2 hours about his childhood, his fears, his dreams. The soldier left crying and sent a message to his estranged mother for the first time in 20 years. The third assassin never even drew his weapon. He sat down across from David in the observation room and said, "Tell me why I shouldn't kill you." David told him about his daughter, how she used to chase butterflies in their small garden, how she wanted to be a starship captain, how she would be over 800 years dead now, nothing but dust scattered among the stars. The assassin listened. Then he stood, nodded once, and walked away. Word spread. The unkillable human. Not because he could not die, but because no one who met him could bring themselves to end his life. Yessa watched this with growing wonder. How do you do it? She asked one night. Do what? Survive. Without fighting. Without running. You just talk. David shrugged. When I was young, my grandmother told me something. She said that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The only weapon against that is kindness. Kindness is weakness. Kindness is the hardest thing in the universe. It takes more strength to be gentle than to be cruel. 3 weeks after his awakening, David convinced Yessa to do something impossible. To hijack a galaxy-wide communication array and broadcast his message to every screen in 3 empires that IT should not have worked. Security systems should have blocked them. Military forces should have stopped them. But somehow, through a combination of luck, skill, and the quiet defection of several communication officers who had heard stories about the gentle human, the broadcast went live for 47 minutes. Every being in the galaxy saw the same image. A single human, sitting in a simple chair, speaking in a soft voice. David did not give a speech. He did not make demands or threats. He did not talk about politics or territory or ancient grievances. He told stories that he talked about his wife, who grew flowers illegally on their apartment balcony because she believed everyone deserved beauty. He talked about his neighbor, an annoying man who complained about everything but always helped carry groceries up the stairs. He talked about birthday parties where children wore silly hats, about rainy afternoons spent reading books, about the smell of bread baking in his mother's kitchen. He talked about holding his daughter for the first time, the weight of her, the trust in her tiny sleeping face, the promise he made to protect her from everything. And then he talked about losing all of it. I was not there when my world ended, David said, his voice cracking. I was floating in darkness, frozen and dreaming, while everyone I loved burned. My wife, my daughter, my annoying neighbor. He paused. 8 billion people, each one with stories just like mine. Birthdays and flowers and bread and rain. All gone, because they were in the way. He looked directly at the camera, at the billions of eyes watching across 3 empires. You have been fighting for 600 years. Do any of you remember why? Do any of you remember what it was like before? When you could meet a stranger and wonder if they might become a friend instead of wondering if they might become a threat. The silence stretched across light years. My species is dead. Earth is gone. I am the last. And I am tired. So tired. But before I join my family in whatever comes after, I want to ask you one question. He leaned forward. When you kill your enemies, who will be left to share a meal with? The broadcast ended. For 3 hours, not a single ship in the galaxy fired its weapons. Communication channels fell silent. Soldiers stood frozen at their posts, remembering things they had buried long ago. Birthdays, flowers, the weight of children in their arms. Then, one by one, weapons systems began powering down. Not everywhere. Not everyone. But enough. For the first time in 600 years, there were pockets of silence in the war. Ships facing each other across the void, choosing not to shoot. And in a small salvage vessel drifting through the dead zone, a human watched the stars and allowed himself a moment of hope. Generals do not like silence. For 600 years, war had been the only constant. It shaped economies. It built careers. It gave purpose to billions who knew nothing else. The sudden quiet spreading through the galaxy was not peace. It was a threat. Supreme Commander Vostok of the Rilthari Empire slammed his fist against his desk hard enough to crack the surface. One broadcast. One pathetic human talking about flowers and bread, and half my fleet refuses to engage the enemy. Not refuses, Supreme Commander, his aide corrected nervously. They simply hesitate. Hesitation in war is death. Similar scenes played out across all 3 empires. The Morvani Collective's ruling council debated for 14 hours about how to handle the human problem. The Sindari Republic's military leaders considered everything from planetary bombardment to kidnapping to public execution, but every option had the same flaw. David had shown his face to the entire galaxy. Killing him now would make him a martyr. Worse, it might turn the hesitation into outright mutiny. While the leaders debated, David kept doing what he did best. He talked. People came to find him. Soldiers who had watched the broadcast and felt something crack inside them. Civilians who had lost family and never been allowed to grieve. Children who had been born into war and knew nothing else. They came by the dozens. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Ships would appear near the salvage vessel, their weapons cold, their crews requesting permission to board. David spoke to every single one that he learned their names. Their losses. Their fears. A Sindari pilot told him about her brother, who died in a battle over a moon neither side really needed. A Morvani engineer confessed he had designed weapons that killed millions and could not sleep at night. A Rilthari soldier, barely more than a child, admitted he had never once questioned why he was fighting. David listened. He cried with them. He held hands and shared meals and asked questions that nobody had ever asked before. What do you want? He would ask. Not what does your empire want? Not what does your commander want? What do you want? The answers were always the same, regardless of species. Peace. Family. Purpose beyond destruction. Yessa watched this happen with growing wonder. She had served in the military for 40 years. She had given orders that killed thousands. She had believed, truly believed, that war was necessary. Inevitable. The natural state of existence. But watching David sit with enemies and strangers, watching him transform soldiers into people, she began to doubt. "I have a child," she told David one evening. "A daughter. I have not spoken to her in 30 years. What? The war required focus. Attachments are weaknesses. I sent her to be raised by relatives where she would be safe, and I returned to duty." Yes's voice cracked. "She must hate me. Have you tried contacting her? What would I say? That I chose the war over her?" David was quiet for a moment. "I would give anything to speak to my daughter one more time. Even if she hated me. Even if all she did was scream. To hear her voice again." He wiped his eyes. "Don't waste the chance I no longer have." That night, Yessa sent a message to her daughter. Just 3 words. "I am sorry." The response came 4 hours later. "Come home, mother. The war can wait." The ceasefire spread, not because anyone ordered it. The 3 faction leaders had actually agreed to meet and coordinate David's elimination. They gathered in neutral space, aboard a diplomatic station that had not been used in centuries, fully intending to end the human threat. David appeared at the council anyway. He had somehow convinced every guard along the way to let him pass. Not through threats or bribery, just by asking about their lives. The 3 most powerful beings in the galaxy stared at him as he walked calmly into their secure chamber. The Rilthari Supreme Commander, the Morvani High Arbiter, the Sindari Grand Admiral. Together, they controlled more firepower than any force in history. David looked at them with those soft brown eyes and smiled. "Thank you for meeting with me." "You were not invited," the Grand Admiral growled. "I know, but I wanted to ask you something." David sat down uninvited at their table. "Do any of you have children?" The question hung in the air. "What does that have to do with anything?" Supreme Commander Vostok demanded. "Everything." David leaned forward. "Your soldiers are refusing to fight, not because they are cowards, but because they remembered they have families. Children who might die, parents who might grieve. They remembered that the enemy soldiers have families too. This is war. Sentiment has no place in it. Then why are you so afraid of it?" Silence. David looked at each of them in turn. "Give me 1 year. 1 year of peace. Let me show you what happens when people stop killing and start talking. If it doesn't work, if the galaxy falls into chaos, you can resume your war. But give me the chance." "And if we refuse?" the High Arbiter asked coldly. "Then you'll have to kill me. And you'll have to explain to your soldiers why you murdered the last human when all he wanted was a chance for peace." The 3 leaders exchanged looks. Their soldiers were already on the edge of mutiny. Killing David now would push them over. 1 year, Supreme Commander Vostok said finally. 1 year. And if you fail, human, the war resumes and your body becomes a monument to foolishness. David smiled. 1 year is all I need. Peace was harder than war. War was simple. You found your enemy. You destroyed them. You survived or you didn't. Peace required something much more difficult. It required trust. And trust had been dead for 600 years. David did not start with politics. He did not demand treaties or borders or reparations. Instead, he started with food. The first exchange program brought Rilthari cooks to a Morvani space station. The Rilthari made their traditional grain dishes. The Morvani shared their fermented vegetables. Neither side died from the food. Some even admitted they liked it. "This is foolish," Supreme Commander Vostok complained during their monthly check-in. "Cooking classes will not end a war." "No," David agreed. "But sharing a meal is the first step towards seeing someone as a person instead of a target." The programs expanded. Morvani musicians visited Rilthari schools and taught children songs their grandparents had forgotten. Sindari farmers shared their techniques with Rilthari colonies struggling to grow food on harsh worlds. A Rilthari poet published a collection of verses about loss and found it translated into every language in the galaxy. Not everyone welcomed the change. Hardliners on every side saw peace as a threat to everything they had built. Bombings struck exchange centers. Assassins targeted those who participated. Propaganda flooded communication networks, warning that the human was a weapon designed to weaken their resolve. David responded to every attack the same way. He attended funerals. When a bombing killed 32 students at a Morvani school hosting Rilthari visitors, David stood at the memorial. He said nothing. He simply cried with the families. With all the families, regardless of which side their children had come from. "Why do you weep for our enemies?" a grieving Morvani mother demanded. "Because they were children," David said. "They had no enemies. They only had lives that ended too soon." The mother stared at him. Then she broke down completely and David held her while she sobbed. Images of that moment spread across the galaxy. The last human, holding a stranger's pain as if it were his own. Young people began to question. They had grown up being told the other side was evil, inhuman, deserving of extinction. But here was a human who saw no difference between them, who grieved equally for all 7 months into the year. Something extraordinary happened that a young Rilthari soldier named Kinat announced his intention to marry a Morvani woman named Scylla. They had met during a cultural exchange, fallen in love, decided that 600 years of hatred meant nothing compared to what they felt. The announcement caused chaos. Interspecies marriage had been illegal in all three empires since the war began. Both families disowned their children. Both governments threatened imprisonment. David asked to officiate the wedding. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, just like his first speech. But this time, there were no words about loss or death. Just two young people promising to build something new together. I don't know if this will work, Kinat admitted during the vows. I don't know if we're strong enough to survive what's coming. But I would rather try and fail than spend my life wondering what could have been. Scylla took his hand. My grandmother told me that love is an act of rebellion. She was right. This is our rebellion. Against fear. Against hatred. Against everyone who says we can't. David smiled as he blessed their union. But Pallas, watching from the crowd, noticed something wrong. The human's hands were shaking. His skin had grown pale. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. You are dying, Pallas said privately after the ceremony. David did not deny it. The cryo damage was worse than your equipment showed, and human bodies weren't designed for alien atmospheres. I've been running on borrowed time since I woke up. There might be treatments. If we could study your biology more closely, no. David shook his head. I don't want to spend my last months in a medical bay being poked and analyzed. I want to spend them doing what I came here to do. Dying. Living. David looked out at the celebration, still continuing. At Rilthari and Morvani and Sindari dancing together, awkwardly, but earnestly. 800 years ago, I lost everything. Wife, daughter, world. I thought my story was over. But I got this. He gestured at the impossible scene before them. I got to see enemies become friends. I got to watch children choose love over hate. I got to matter one more time. Pallas was silent. I'm not afraid of death, David continued. I'm afraid of dying before I finish. So please, old friend, let me keep going. Let me see this through. 3 weeks before the year ended, David collapsed. Yessa caught him before he hit the ground. His body had finally given out. The damage was too severe. Human medicine might have saved him once, but human medicine no longer existed. Don't tell anyone, David whispered. Not yet. Let me finish. Finish what? David smiled weakly, reminding them. He spent his remaining days in a small room aboard Yessa's ship. People came to see him, to thank him, to say goodbye. The line stretched for miles, ships waiting patiently for their chance to speak with the dying human on the last day of the year. Surrounded by friends he had made from every corner of the galaxy, David closed his eyes and said, I think I did enough. Then he stopped breathing, but the galaxy kept turning. And for the first time in 600 years, it turned toward hope. When David Reese died, the galaxy held its breath, not in grief. Not exactly, but in something deeper. Something that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing the next step would change everything forever. The news spread within hours. The last human was gone. The voice that had asked them to remember, the hands that had held so many in their pain, the eyes that had seen no difference between friend and enemy. All silent now. The three faction leaders arrived at David's bedside before his body had grown cold. They had not coordinated this. They had not sent messages or made appointments. They simply came, each arriving within minutes of the others, each wearing expressions that surprised themselves. They found thousands already there. Soldiers from every empire crowded the corridors of Yessa's small ship. Civilians who had traveled from distant worlds. Children who had never met David but knew his stories by heart. A Morvani mother held hands with a Rilthari father, both weeping silently. A Sindari elder sat beside a Rilthari youth, sharing a flask of something warm. Supreme Commander Vastok pushed through the crowd until he reached the room where David lay. The human looked smaller in death. Fragile. It seemed impossible that something so delicate could have shaken three empires. Yessa stood beside the bed. She had not moved since David's last breath. Her daughter stood with her, having arrived just days before. 30 years of silence, ended by 3 words and a dying man's advice. He wanted to be cremated, Yessa said without looking up, scattered among the stars. He said that was what his people did when they wanted to go home. We will honor that, the Morvani High Arbiter said. Her voice, usually cold as deep space, cracked slightly. It is the least we can do. The Sindari Grand Admiral said nothing. He simply stared at David's peaceful face and remembered a conversation from months ago. David had asked about his children. The Admiral had admitted he hadn't seen them in years. Too busy with the war. David had just smiled sadly and said, "The war will always find reasons to keep you. Your children won't wait forever." The Admiral had called his children that night. For the first time in a decade, the funeral was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships from all 3 empires gathered near the ruins of Earth. Millions of them. Battle cruisers floated beside cargo haulers. Military vessels powered down their weapons and opened their viewports to watch. David's ashes were released into the void, drifting slowly toward the debris field where a blue planet had once spun, where 8 billion people had lived and loved and dreamed before they became dust. Yessa spoke first. I was taught that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, emotional to the point of madness. I was taught that their extinction was inevitable, perhaps even necessary. She paused, composing herself. I was wrong. David Reese was the kindest soul I have ever known. He lost everything. His family, his world, his entire species. And instead of hatred, he chose love. Instead of revenge, he chose connection. He taught me that strength is not found in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to build. Others spoke. Pallas talked about healing and hope. Fosek, never one for words, simply said, he remembered my name. Every time, like it mattered. Kinnat and Scylla, the newlywed couple, spoke about rebellion and choosing something better. When the speeches ended, something remarkable happened. Supreme Commander Vastok stepped forward. The most feared military leader in the Rilthari Empire. The man who had ordered the destruction of 17 worlds. He looked out at the gathered fleet, at enemies and allies floating side by side, and he spoke. The ceasefire ends today. 1 year, we agreed. The year is finished. He paused. But I find that I cannot give the order to resume fighting. I look at my officers, and I see them standing beside Morvani and Sindari, and I cannot tell them to start killing again. The High Arbiter nodded slowly. The collective agrees. We have remembered too much. Forgotten too much hatred. We cannot go back to what we were. The Grand Admiral stared at his hands. Hands that had signed death warrants for millions. The Republic will not be the ones to restart this war. Not today. Not ever. It was not a treaty. There were no documents signed, no territories negotiated, no reparations demanded. It was simply 3 leaders, standing before the ashes of a gentle man, admitting they had lost the will to destroy. The war ended. Not with a bang or a surrender or a victory. It just stopped. Like a fire that finally runs out of fuel. A year later, they built a monument on the ruins of Earth. A statue of David, standing with arms open, surrounded by figures representing every species in the galaxy. 3 empires worked together to create it. Old enemies learning to use tools instead of weapons. The inscription read, "Here lived a species that knew how to love. One of them taught us to remember." 50 years later, a Rilthari child visited the monument with her grandmother. Yessa was old now, her scales fading to silver, but her eyes still held the fire they had gained in those strange days aboard a salvage ship. "Tell me about the human again," the child asked. Yessa smiled, remembering. He was small, soft. He cried easily and laughed often. He asked about people's lives and actually listened to the answers. And he ended the war? All by himself. No, little one. He did not end the war. He simply reminded us why we should. Yessa looked up at the statue, at those open arms reaching toward the stars. The war ended because we chose to end it. Because we remembered that our enemies had children too. Because we got tired of grieving. But he started it. He started something. A question. And we finally found the courage to answer it. The child considered this. What was the question? Yessa closed her eyes, hearing David's voice one last time. Soft. Sad. Full of a love that had survived the death of everything. When you kill your enemies, who will be left to share a meal with? The child thought about this for a long time. Then she reached up, and took her grandmother's hand. "I think I understand," she said. "I know you do, little one." Yessa squeezed her hand gently. "That is why there is hope." Above them, the stars burned on. And somewhere among them, scattered between the light, the last human had finally gone home.